You're listening to the TEPIS Paranormal Talking Point podcast, a show that discusses various aspects of the paranormal world, with paranormal news, ghost stories, interviews, and much more. And without further ado, let's get into some talking points. Hi guys, Scott here from TEPIS Paranormal, and welcome back to another episode of the TEPIS Paranormal Talking Point podcast. So, as you may have seen, I've recently been doing some interviews with various people, and today I've got another one for you. Today I'm joined by Lozzy, and we talk about a number of things. Lozzy is obviously a skeptic, which, compared to my two previous guests, is very different. Jordan and Maya are both believers in the paranormal. Lozzy is not. So we go over a number of topics, things that, he thinks may impact the paranormal, what he thinks ghosts may be, any stories he's heard from friends and family, as well as what he thinks of some of the events that have happened both to him and to Jordan, Maya, myself. We had a nice sort of half an hour talk, and hopefully you enjoy. So, Lozzy, thank you for joining me.
I'm enjoying being here. I watched a couple of your I watched a couple of clips with Maya that you did interview, your podcast you did with Maya. That was pretty good. So I'm enjoying or looking forward to the questions that I'm going to get asked. Hopefully I'll give you some good answers.
Cool,
And
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So, we've only met once, which was in a abandoned fort in what felt like the middle of the night, despite the fact it was about 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
In a very dark part of the year. It was an interesting time.
It was a very strange occasion to meet you for the first time, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that is the same way I met Jordan, Maya, and Bailey as well. First time I met them was when we turned up at the Ancient Ram Inn, so there is a pattern emerging.
Yeah. Maybe it's the best way to meet people. Just go on a paranormal.
Just jump straight in, I guess. Yeah. So, you, I assume, would describe yourself as quite skeptical.
Yes, yeah,
something that I think a lot of people would agree. Obviously, you've been on a few sort of paranormal-ish investigations. You've been dragged along by Jordan to several.
Yeah.
You did the Haunted Forest with APMA.
Yes.
You obviously went to the other Haunted Forest with Jordan with the knife in the tree.
Yes, yeah, we did that, yeah.
I think you went to Harwich Fort.
Yeah, that was the one. That was probably. I think that was the first one I remember doing with him.
I think that was Jordan's sort of intro into it as well.
Yeah, that was like probably first feature length, like sort of special video.
Yeah.
On paranormal stuff.
Ooh. So, would you say you have an interest in the paranormal?
Not to the extent obviously Jordan has, and I guess to a certain extent yourself, obviously. I have questions, but I don't. It's not something that. I mean, Jordan's built his career around paranormal stuff and true crime and that sort of stuff. So obviously, he's going to have a bigger interest in it than me, or more stakes on the line, I guess, than me for it. But there's questions I have, and it'll be interesting to find out the answers if we could find out definitively. But yeah, I can't say I'm like it's not a hobby, it's not a passion of mine, but it interests me to a certain point.
Cool. Okay. That makes sense. So, would you say you have any sort of early paranormal memories in terms of, not necessarily experiences, but in terms of just how you were exposed to it? So, TV shows that you may have seen or horror movies, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I remember watching when I was quite young, Goosebumps. I don't really remember that much from it, to be honest, other than the theme tune. So I don't know if that leads to anything, like it weren't that good in my mind. I don't know. I remember being scared of the dark. I remember like sort of I suppose most people probably feel this, but you feel like someone's behind you if you're in the dark, running up the stairs to your bedroom as quickly as possible.
Yeah, turning the lights off and just bolting.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't really feel like I've had that much exposure to, I've never really been a fan of horror films, just because I find most of them to be borderline stupid. But there are good ones. Like I've seen good horror films that have kind of unsettled me Hereditary is one that I always go to. It's not really like an out and out horror, but
No,
it
it's
did.
more of a sort of psychological sort of.
But yeah, I think I've not really had that much exposure to it as I've grown up.
Mhm.
But yeah, I watch the odd occasional horror, but it's not really like my main
Sure.
genre of film or TV show to go to.
Okay, so obviously you've visited a number of weird locations that we spoke about before for sort of paranormal intentions. Are there any of the places you've been that made you sort of question things, or at least made you sort of contemplate?
I don't for going to the fort where I used to live, where I grew up. The latest one we did,
Hmm.
I didn't really think there was much going on there, just because I feel like it's too familiar.
Yep.
Um, I used to like go there pretty much a couple of times a week when I was growing up because my granddad used to take me for a walk. We'd used to go there with my cousins and play football on the field there,
Hmm.
run about, do all what stupid stuff like climbing the walls, which you're not allowed to do, but we did it. Um, so yeah, I don't really feel like I felt anything on that one. The Harwich one, I did feel strange at points, but I think that was just because we had two people there who were one was basically leading us around, another one was another paranormal
Yeah.
investigator, and did also have a medium there, and they kind of were telling stories. And sometimes you get wrapped up in the story
Hmm.
about what they're saying rather than the actual contents of what's happening around you.
Yeah, it kind of impacts you, I guess, in that sort of a way. You feel the way they're trying to make you feel.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I think there's a couple of times where they said something unsettling about a particular person who they claim to be there, and it does give you a bit of a chill.
Hmm.
But I can't remember being absolutely like scared or frightened or thinking there was truly something with
Sure.
us. The knife in the tree um, is the one that Jordan always references as to kind of one of the tipping points for him. I can't explain it. It's one of those things that I can't explain. I don't know why it happened or how it happened, and it's weird, but it still doesn't drive me to think that
Yeah.
it was something to do with
I feel
paranormal.
that there are logical explanations for it.
Yes.
So, do you have any sort of family or friends with experiences that you
Uh,
know of?
I mean, my other half said she's had experiences with um, sort of spirits or paranormal stuff. I think my granddad also has had a couple of paranormal experiences. I think the one that I only remember from my granddad was it was literally where we first went in to the Roman fort. Before we actually got there, there's like a cemetery
Yeah.
and a church just before we go on the track towards the fort. He has, for reference, he has multiple family members buried in there.
Hmm.
So I feel like that needs to be said before I say what I'm about to say. But he feels like he saw a family member in the graveyard as he was walking past. That's
Okay.
all he really said to me. I didn't really. I was quite young when he told me, so I didn't really pry into it. But that was the one that my granddad said he saw. My girlfriend, she's had a couple. The one that sticks out is when she was in one of the previous houses her mum and her lived in. She said that she felt like there was a presence in the house,
Hmm.
uh, and this particular area where she thought or she felt like it was the like emanating from. It did turn out that that was the particular room that he died in, apparently. So that was her paranormal experience
Okay.
that I remember.
Cool. Okay. So that's yes. There's some interesting bits there. Like you say, the family member one. It sort of is a like you say. If that's a place where family members are buried,
Mm,
it's almost a I guess a unintentional thing. You'll be thinking about it, which may I guess almost trick the brain into it.
potentially, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. So okay. Um, obviously, of all of the locations you visited, what would you say out of them is your favourite in terms of the one that just felt sort of the weirdest? I guess.
Um, I think it's probably Harwich, to be honest. It was a really cool location. It's I can't really remember what it was. I don't know if it's like a battlement or a sort of artillery point or a point near the sea. I don't really know what
Hmm.
strategic value it had, but it was literally a cylinder shape. So you walked round it, and it was just rooms that led on to other rooms, and you'd walked in a circle.
Yeah.
Um, and that had, I think, the thing that made that quite eerie was the fact, obviously, they're at night, so everything's elevated because of the dark.
Hmm.
But also, the rooms were really weird layouts and shapes because of the fact that it was circular. You can never see straight lines. You can never see straight through a corridor
Hmm.
unless you're looking from one side of the circle to the other. And I felt like that always made it, you're thinking about what's around the corner um, every time you're walking into a new room.
Hmm.
But that just felt weird. But also, it had a lot of historical points there that were quite good that they brought up there. I mean, I can't remember any of them, but I remember it being quite heavy on the historical points.
Okay. So this is quite an open-ended question that I've asked to both Jordan and Maya previously.
Okay.
It's one that I think you'll have a very different take on, and
Mm.
it's sort of the question of what is a ghost, or what to you would you say, a ghost is for other people? What
Uh,
what do you think other people are experiencing or seeing? Do you think it's all in the head? Do you think it's a physical thing that we can't explain?
I don't really have a definitive answer. I guess because my exposure to um, spirits, ghosts, paranormal stuff has been limited to only basically the three occasions
Hmm.
that I've been with Jordan on the investigations, and obviously media like films and TV that I've watched. I mostly think that what people see is a projection of something that's already in their mind.
Hmm.
That is my only logical explanation for things if there's no other thing obvious that's caused that. Um, the only other thing I would probably say is that maybe people do mistake things that you wouldn't even think of being a possibility, but it turns out, if you have something in this position, this wind makes this noise and the door makes this
Hmm.
noise. It, I think a lot of the time it can be logically explained, but you don't necessarily go to that place when you're in that situation. Like if you
Yeah.
hear something creak, you don't necessarily think that's a door or floorboard. You might think that's something nefarious or a spirit or
Hmm.
something. So that's what I feel people experience, but it doesn't necessarily make it a spirit or a ghost, I guess,
Yep.
is what I feel.
Okay. So I assume, and I think we spoke about it briefly at the fort, you saw the ancient Ramin video,
Yeah.
specifically the mirror.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? I know you went into it briefly in that sort of video, but just to
Yeah.
recap.
I mean, I believe everyone, basically Jordan, you, Maya, and Bailey that were there. I believe you all that you wouldn't stage that.
Hmm.
So I believe that it was done via something else, whether it be maybe someone not even noticing that they've touched it, or something rubbing
Hmm.
up against it that you weren't even involved in. I feel like that's the more logical
Okay.
explanation for it, other than obviously, but it does seem very weird
Yeah.
that it would unsettle me if I was there at the time and I'd experienced that firsthand. It would unsettle me, definitely.
Yeah.
It would.
It definitely unsettled us.
It unsettled everyone by the looks of it, and yeah, I mean, just the way that Jordan kind of, and Maya, to when I think it cuts to Maya in the video afterwards, and she's like almost in tears.
Hmm.
So yes, it would have had a very weird effect on me if I'd experienced it firsthand. But I still can't say that it's
Yeah.
definitive
No,
proof.
of course. Obviously, until it happens to you.
Yes, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so obviously you did an Estes method at the Roman fort when we visited. What were your
Mhm.
thoughts on that as a sort of method, and compared to what you were thinking it was leading into it?
So I've only ever been on the receiving end of someone saying what they're hearing in their headphones. So I've never actually experienced it firsthand of actually listening to what's being fed back through the headphones. My I think I said it in the video. My one big surprise was how quick it goes through the
Hmm.
channels. Um, which is something that did take me by surprise because I just assumed it would be maybe a channel every other quarter of a second or something like that. But it is much faster.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I felt on my go that I didn't really get a lot. I can't really remember what I said. I don't know if I said maybe like 2 or 3
So
words
there
that.
were a couple of names I think you got through. I think I'm sure the name Tom came through on your
Yeah,
go,
yeah,
and then we got a little bit distracted by some sort of screeching
yeah,
demon or potentially an owl, depending on which comments you listen to. Um, yeah, which kind of interrupted yours as I sort of dived for your torch.
oh, yeah. I don't. I couldn't hear it at all. I
Hmm.
didn't hear it. I only just saw you and Jordan react as if something has just literally like startled both of you. Um, I went to take a headphone off, but then I was like, "Well, you're not running. Neither of you are running, so I'll keep the headphone on." I then did take one off, but I still didn't hear it the second time when it
Yeah, no, I think
screeched.
I think the second time you just put it back on again, or you were just putting them back on again as it went
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
It was, I think it was definitely an owl,
Okay, yeah,
but I think there was that initial sort of it's pitch black. You've got the only good torch. You can't actually respond to us. We don't know what that is.
yeah,
Because it sounded like it was on top of the wall behind us as well, which is quite, a significant height. That's not going to just be a person or something. It's like, hang on a minute, what is that?
yeah. It must have been because I only heard it back really through the video,
Hmm.
and I don't know how well the video captured the sound of it, but it must have been louder in reality to what it was in the video
Yeah.
because it didn't sound as bad in the video, and this obviously just the way it's been picked up from the mic. Um, but I feel like the reaction that you and Jordan gave made it feel like it was worse in
Hmm.
person than it was in the video. But like I said, that
Yeah.
I had no idea what was going
I
on. I
think
just
we were both,
thought,
we were both a bit too startled, I think, to explain to you what was happening as well.
yeah,
It was sort of
yeah,
we were trying to work out what it was, while you were trying to work out what we were trying to, find.
yeah, because Jordan, I don't know if it was the mic that fell off the camera. I
Yeah,
think it was the
as he turned, I
yeah,
think the mic fell off, and it was like it became an entire thing because he turned so quickly because it took
yeah.
him sort of that shockingly.
He reached terminal velocity as he's
Flung the microphone off, and yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so obviously it's a fairly big planet we live on.
it is.
I don't know why I went for that question. Um, are there any locations, haunted or even historic, that you'd really like to visit? Not
I mean,
necessarily from a paranormal point of view, but for a place that may have some paranormal history, I guess.
I guess well, there's I've got several locations in
Hmm.
mind. One of them I've already actually been to. I don't know whether there's a lot of paranormal stuff that's happened there, but Vatican City, um, which I just went as a historical point of view.
Hmm.
It was a brilliant experience to go there, but I don't know if there's any really paranormal stories. I'm sure there probably is.
So it's sort of the home of exorcisms and
Right.
demons. So it's fairly. I think from that point of view, there's a lot of sort of things tied to it, but I don't know if there's anything, like you say, directly there.
I mean, I don't know whether because when I went there, it was 2017. I don't know whether they would have actively advertised the fact that that was the home of exorcisms and that. But yeah, that was one of the places that was in my mind. I wanted to always go. In terms of any future places I want to go, I can't really think any off the top of my head, to be honest. Historical places normally, I would say, are pretty heavily linked with paranormal stuff anyway.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I'd probably say any historical place really within reason is going to have some sort of like link to paranormal. I guess it
cool.
just seems that way.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you say, it's definitely tied. I think places. obviously to make a place fairly historic, something fairly dramatic has to have happened there,
True,
and
yeah.
that always seems to be tied to, I guess, to the paranormal in terms of the various different theories for why ghosts are there or why hauntings happen.
Yeah, one thing I wish I did do when because I was in York quite a lot, in I think it was 2018. I think I traveled there quite a lot, for work. One thing I wish I did do was I walked down the shambles and I went to the York dungeons, which is basically a tourist attraction, to be honest.
Mhm.
But more the shambles. I know they did like a kind of ghost walk where you go to certain places in at night time, and the shambles is meant to be one of the places that is historically quite heavy with paranormal stuff.
Yeah,
So that would probably would have been cool to do that. Um, but yeah, I unfortunately I didn't because I was there for work.
that's fair. So, I guess, are there any sort of things you're interested in that are kind of paranormal, but not, not specifically ghosts? So, UFOs, aliens, cryptids, psychics, etc. Obviously, APMA is fairly tied in some ways to cryptids and UFOs.
Yeah, we do a lot of content, or have done a lot of content on UFOs and cryptids as well. I'd probably say out of all of them, like whether it be ghost spirits, paranormal in general, aliens, I'd probably say aliens and UFOs are probably top of the list if I had to put them in order.
Hmm.
Um, just because I feel like there's more interest in that sort. I like sci-fi, so I'm probably going to be a bit more interested in aliens and UFOs and that sort of stuff over paranormal,
Yeah.
spirits and sort of stuff like that.
Okay. So, in terms of cryptids, are there any that you believe in more than others? Are there any you sort of think about and go, that one's plausible? Obviously, compared to some that are very much not.
I don't really know if any. I think any of them are plausible. I think there are ones that are more plausible
Hmm.
than others. I think something like Bigfoot is more plausible than something like the Jersey Devil, um, because there is, however minute, a link between that creature and something that has either lived or lives now.
Hmm.
Whereas the Jersey Devil seems like a big jump from,
From reality
yeah,
almost.
a big jump from reality.
Yeah. So, obviously, you have a slightly personal link to the Mothman,
I do, yeah.
given that you appeared in a video once.
With the Mothman,
Hmm.
or on behalf of the Mothman.
Yes.
Um, Mothman is I like the idea that there's a man that's also a moth.
It's a good concept.
Yeah, because you get, it depends how it's depicted, but the way that I've seen it depicted is literally a man with wings, with sort of red eyes
Yeah.
and antennas on top of his head. Um, I would love, to be honest, I'd love to see that if it was true. I'd love to be able to see the Mothman. I think the whole idea behind Mothman is cool. It also links into a game that or a franchise
Hmm.
that I like, Fallout, that had it in one of their games as like a mythical creature in that. So that like kind of piqued my interest. But yeah, I think the whole story around it is brilliant. The festival that they hold for Mothman is brilliant, and I'd love to go just to
It
see.
would be great.
Just I think if Jordan could take all of us and we would all go, I think that would be great just to
Yeah.
document what goes on there.
What are your thoughts on Mothman being an omen of death, or I guess just generally omens of death?
Mothman and Omen Death. I wouldn't link the two personally, just
Hmm.
from what I've seen. But I feel like Omens of Death come in very different packages. You have Omens of Death, like the Mayans, who had a thought around a certain date,
Hmm.
um, and certain events preceding that would be an omen of death. But the actual idea that there's a creature or a being that is the omen of death, it doesn't really compute for me. It's not, again, I put my logical hat on and I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't mean it's not true, but
Hmm.
it just doesn't make sense to me.
That's fair enough. And I think the sort of final question, What do you sort of hope to, I guess, find within the paranormal? So obviously you're continuing to go to paranormal locations. I think we've got one coming up early next year that
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm allowed to say you're coming to, but you're coming to.
I've
I,
been asked.
I,
So,
I don't know if that's been announced yet anywhere else, but
there you go. You got an exclusive.
what do you hope to sort of, I guess, experience yourself there?
Uh, I don't necessarily feel like I have to experience anything. I'm there more really because I think it will be enjoyable just to have a group of us
Hmm.
do it, and I'd be interested to see. I mean, where we're going looks like it'll have a lot of information around this sort of paranormal stuff, which is the entire reason we're going. But it'll be interesting to see what they have to offer. Whether I need to have the questions answered that I have, I don't necessarily think I do. This is the thing I kind of link back to the start. For Jordan and yourself and people who follow Jordan, the answers that they want, they kind of not necessarily need, but the want is more
Hmm.
on their side than mine. For me, it'd be interesting to find out, but it's not of
Yeah.
paramount importance for me whether it gets answered.
Okay.
Whereas for Jordan, the whole thing is to kind of find out the truth. And that's what he's based his career around on his channel.
Hmm.
So the stakes are higher for Jordan than they are for me. But it will be fun. It'll be funny, probably in parts. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And that's kind of where I am with it. I'm not looking into it going, I need to have this answered or I want that specific thing answered. I'm not looking at that and thinking, I need to come away in there thinking that either spirits are real, ghosts are real, or it's all
Yeah.
fake.
Of course.
So yeah, I'm just looking forward to us doing it.
Cool. And I guess one thing I've just kind of thought of as an extra question almost, what would it take for you to definitively, I guess, decide the paranormal is real? You know, is what one event, I guess, kind of, would it be a ghost standing in front of you, or would it be, something floating in front of you, something moving in front of you, etc.?
I think it would have to be something very substantial. Just because if I see a figure in a hallway and I know it's none of anyone else that I'm with, I'm not gonna think that's a spirit without there being something very substantial.
Hmm.
So, like I say, if it was a ghost in front of me and I witnessed the ghost firsthand and I couldn't explain it any other way, then I'm more towards the side of thinking that I've just had a paranormal experience.
Hmm.
Um,
I guess, like you
but
say, it's almost a scientific experiment. It needs to be controlled. It is
yes,
very
yeah,
much if there's a figure down a hallway and you know for a fact there's nobody else down that hallway,
yeah,
I guess that adds a lot more credibility than,
mm,
to a degree, I guess, when Jordan, Meyer, and that go to the abandoned buildings. Um, Obviously there legitimately could be someone there.
yes, yeah,
Whereas I think the more the Ancient Ramin and 30 East Drive are controlled a little bit
yeah,
more,
yeah,
controlled access obviously makes it that little bit more scientific. If you were to see a figure at the end of a hallway in that one when you know there's no one else in the building, I
yeah,
guess that raises more questions. Which,
yeah.
okay, yeah, I mean that is obviously it's a good approach. It's good to have someone skeptical. I feel like previously Jordan was skeptical, and I feel like he's kind of lost that in the last sort of, I guess, 3 or 4 investigations he's done where things have happened.
Yeah, I feel like it is probably. I feel like the first tipping point was that knife in the tree,
Hmm.
and then once the mirror thing happened at the Ram Inn, I think that's where it fully switched.
Yeah, that was the
Uh,
point where there's not a lot of skepticism. I mean, Bailey's still skeptical,
yeah,
but I think currently it very much outweighs. Myself, Jordan, Meyer are all very much, I think, on the believing side
yeah,
now. Um, which again, going into the Ancient Ramin, I wasn't necessarily convinced. Now I think I find it difficult to argue purely based on the events of that night. Um, at least argue that there's something. I don't necessarily know what. but just something that I can't explain, which again is also the driving factor, I think, going forward for me. Sorry, someone outside decided they wanted to like rev their bike. But yeah, okay, so I think that brings us to the end of it. That's all the questions I've got. Is there anything you'd like to add at all?
I'd probably, if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask you a question. To be
Okay.
honest, out of all the stuff that you did at the ramming, because that was I think that was the time where I saw the most equipment or most means tested and how you communicate with the
Mm-hmm.
ghosts and spirits and stuff. What do you think is the most effective, or are there any equipment that you don't fully believe in the potential of it?
So I find EMF to be questionable. Obviously, the
Mm,
EMF detector is a series of lights, it flashes. I don't know enough about, I guess, electricity. About just, I know they detect electromagnetic fields. I don't know anything about electromagnetic fields
me
other than
neither.
that when we're in the middle of a Roman fort, for example, there shouldn't be any, to my understanding, because everything is stone, and
Yeah,
I don't know if they can appear and disappear naturally. It's that sort of, I guess, to a degree, when people say there's static in the air.
right.
When the air feels slightly staticky, I guess when there's thunder and lightning around, I don't know if that can affect it. So I guess that's my, that going off and knowing that it can be caused by things like phones and radios, even though we don't have them on us, and if we do, they're, airplane mode, etc. It's kind of that, knowing that that could potentially set them off, it kind of adds that, I guess, question to my head of, is this actually going off because there's a ghost there? Or could
Yeah,
it be explained by something I don't understand? But yeah, I think that's the only one that I'm very, like, obviously the Estes method, the spirit box. I sort of understand the concept of it. Again, I don't know enough about radio waves to know for sure, but the concept that they can sort of alter them and speak through them in some way kind of makes sense to me, in the sense that I don't have anything that can disprove that.
yeah.
I think that's it for me with those.
Okay. Because the only other thing I remember is I can't remember what it's called, but you had it was like a chain and it would
Yes,
sway.
that's the
Uh,
pendulum. Yeah.
pendulum. Yeah, that just intrigued me because that was quite weird to watch, to be honest.
So that was a very last minute thing. That was, I think, about 3 days before we went to the ancient Ram Inn. I went on Amazon, typed in paranormal tools, and just started scrolling through the pages. And
Yeah.
I stumbled across that and thought, okay, I understand the concept of it. It's a, you hold it still, it swings because, alterations in the air. And it's kind of a, if it's answering your questions accurately, it's, it's another interesting thing that may or may not have some credibility to it.
Right. Okay.
Again, it's something that I don't really see in, I haven't really seen it in anything else, any other paranormal shows or any other investigations I've seen. But it's one of those things that I guess it's almost it can't hurt to try it.
Yeah. Yeah. The more methods
Mm-hmm.
you've got, the more likely, I guess, you are to see if it works.
Yeah, I think that's the best way of looking at it. So I think that brings us to the end of this. Obviously, you've got the APMA podcast, um,
Yeah.
which I would recommend everyone checks out.
Yeah.
I
Please do.
I can't remember the socials, but if you know any of them, feel free to shout them out now.
We've got Atma, just at Atma podcast is most of the socials that we have. For I think that'll be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and obviously YouTube.
Cool. And then so obviously we're going to some haunted places as a group next year,
Yeah,
and looking forward to those.
yeah, definitely. I like the fact that we're just going as a group.
Mm-hmm.
I like spending time with Maya, Bailey, yourself, and Jordan, obviously. So it'll be at the very least it'll be fun.
It will be entertaining if nothing else.
Yes.
Hopefully something happens, we get some good evidence.
Mm.
But yeah, very worst case, at least we'll have a good night, and
Yeah,
hopefully it will be fun to watch.
yeah. Hopefully.
Cool. So thanks for joining me, Lozzy, and yeah, that will be it.
Thanks for having me.
So I just want to say a big thank you to Lozzy for joining me. Please check out the APMA podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. I've been Scott from TEPIS Paranormal, and I'll see you in the next episode.